of course, over the time, I worked for several years at AWS. And at AWS, while I was at AWS, I ended up joining the Amazon Alexa team. I was employee like 10 on the skills team, helped build those 100 skills that I had mentioned earlier, helped educate and evangelize. And in that time, though, it was really an exciting moment. But I will tell you, we weren't very focused on like, who could this hurt? How could this be dangerous? Is there any way we might affect someone negatively? We were kind of on this wild ride, very similar to what I'm seeing with GPT, this wild ride of opportunity and capability. But we do have a responsibility to actually think differently. We know the consequences of building technology without that thoughtfulness. And so I'm going to share with you 4 lessons that I've learned as a woman in technology, as a minority, as a unique voice, and hopefully empower you to share those same concerns or raise your voice in your own environments. So the first thing I always like to talk about is that we're in this new world, so we think, right, around generative AI and Chat GPT, but it's really important to remember that the concept of Chat GPT, which is, if you know a little bit about GPT in general, right, generative, pre-trained, transformer, a pre-trained model, which is what GPT is not new. We've been, of course, a pre-trained model was used in Alexa. It's also used at Microsoft. Many of the cognitive services that you can use today are pre-trained foundation models that you can leverage. AWS has a huge collection of models available through SageMaker that are, again, not GPT, yes, is one of them, but there are dozens of different types of models. I'll share with you a little bit more about that at the end. But it's important that this applied and generative AI technology, it escalates, or maybe the better word is accelerates our ability to deliver value to people who need it most, whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in call centers, whether that's in retail, whether that's in finance or education. We have the chance to now deliver valuable resources, valuable services to customers faster than ever before, because we don't have to spend years or decades building models from scratch to do that work. So there's a couple lessons, as I mentioned. I think there's probably 4 solid lessons that I've learned during my time at Amazon Alexa that hopefully you will benefit from as well. One of them is the idea of inclusive engineering. I coined this term a few years ago when I realized that the critical moment, honestly, when you're building an AI solution that will serve billions of users similar to OpenAI today, the critical moment is when you build the team that's going to do that work. And the reason why that's so critical is because oftentimes it's the people on the team that will raise the first flags on accessibility issues or on productivity issues. So it's the very first thing that we do is think about, how do we create a team that's at least empathetic, but more importantly, inclusive of very diverse perspectives? And I don't mean just ethnically or gender-wise, though yes, of course, have women, have people of color, but it's way more than that, right? It also includes neurodiversity and our ability to have people that think fast and think slow. There's a book that was recently released about this, right? It's important to have quick starts, people that are very, very idea focused, and we need those that are gonna dot the I's and cross the T's. We need people that are super organized and people that are, off the cuff and spontaneous. All of these different personas. I even say we need dog owners and cat owners, right? Because they're different people. So we need to bring all of them together into our environment in order to provide the ability for us to see the world, see our solution that we're building through the eyes of as many people in the world as we can. Oftentimes, and I remember this certainly in my early days at Amazon Alexa, where I would be thinking to myself questions like, is this good for my son? Is this good for my dad? Is it good for me as a woman? Is it good for me as a Latina? Like, I would be thinking about this, but oftentimes that thought would just stay in my head because I didn't really understand the impact of my very specific perspective on the world. Inclusive engineering, though, is not just about having these unique perspectives on a team. It's also about setting a very direct and accountable intention on building with inclusive data, right? Generating an inclusive data set, ensuring that that data set does not accidentally overlook a demographic or a persona. It's very interesting today because in the past, when we built an application, we'd even do persona work to build an application. We'd think, who's the end user, who's going to use this, what are their needs. We often give them a name like Sarah, who's a mom of two, and we give them this whole persona of attributes, and we build our solution to that. Today, in the world of artificial intelligence, we can't think that way. We don't know the personas. We have to be as expansive and exhaustive as we can within, of course, the bounds of our resources to do so. But it's our responsibility. The more people we consider in the designing of our AI solution, the more people will serve in its when it reaches production. Another philosophy I have, or I often talk about, is building with a multimodal strategy. This term has actually taken a twist in the generative AI space, but I still mean it from the perspective of, as a developer, as a product owner, as a UI UX designer, right? Our job is to think more broadly than the single application that we're building. So it's not about how do I build this web app or how do I build this mobile app. I remember during my time at National Public Radio, they had a team, or we had a team for building web applications, for building mobile applications. And actually there was an iOS team and an Android team. There was a team for Alexa. There was, all these different teams, and each one of them were kind of run independently. And what I realized was our customer, those who were looking for good content via National Public Radio or NPR, they would have a completely different experience depending on which platform they landed on. And so I am very passionate about, can we think about the world differently? Can we think about a multimodal world where someone could start a conversation with a brand, with a company in their car and continue it in their office, and then come in their kitchen and continue the conversation there, and that system will know who they are no matter what. And that's the world of context. It's what the transformer part of GPT really enabled us to do much better than we've ever done before, right? We can now hold the context. I mean, I just today, for example, yesterday or maybe a week ago, I went into GPT-4 and I asked it a question. And then I went back today and asked it to translate the answer into Spanish, completely out of the blue. And it remembered the question that I had asked and translated it into Spanish. And I thought that that was fantastic because many of you know the experience of, that when we deliver this type of capability, we often will be kind of bound by, I'll start a conversation, for example, on my phone or maybe on the website. And when I go to call the office or call the call center, they don't know who I am. I have to start over, right? And so that conversation is very frictionful, I'll say, right? It has a lot of friction in it. And now when we think multimodal, we're going to carry the context with us. And GPT is certainly a technology that allows us to do that. Now, of course, I do think we want to be thinking about how we build a ethical and responsible solution. So I've mentioned this already, but this means that we need to think differently about how we're going to deploy this capability. How are we going to create a technology in a way that it is serving more than just that original demographic maybe we built for? How do we make sure that it's fair? How do we make sure that it doesn't accidentally, fall into creating injustice in the world? How do we make sure that it's transparent so people understand it? How do we make sure it's explainable so that the business understands the impact of the decisions that are being made? GPT, as I mentioned, is a pre-trained transformer, which means that it's pre-trained on existing data. 499 million websites, right, were scraped in order to create it. Those websites created by humans. Those humans, guess what, are biased, right? They're biased. They have very specific, challenges around amplification or even embellishment of facts. And so all of those things that are true about humans are amplified in a model that is pre-trained with that kind of data. So we need to be responsible and really implement kind of an ethical set of guidelines around how do we use this technology so that we're not accidentally or intentionally amplifying bias that can hurt the demographics we're trying to serve. So there is an acronym I often leverage called JEDI. Someone attributed it to me and a few of my friends on LinkedIn. that we are AI Jedis. And I love that, not only because, of course, I love Jedi in general. I like being a Jedi. I like the idea of being a Jedi, but it actually stands for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it means that when we build our solutions, we think around those concepts. How do we make sure that that is an intentional thread that's weaved through everything that we do? And so I find it, of course, an honor to be named something related to those 4 principles. But the fact that it leads to an acronym like JEDI makes me even happier. So these are some of oh, I missed this one. Sorry. One of the final ones I think is probably the most important is often people ask me, how did you get involved in Alexa in the earliest days? How did you get a job at Microsoft in cognitive services before it was what it is today, before it was popular? How did you get involved in generative AI before it became, popular, which means I said yes to the opportunity to learn about it 2 years ago. How did I know to say yes to that? And I will tell you that I have a philosophy of learning by doing. And when I learn by doing, what that means is that I have an approach where if I see something that's interesting to me, I will go and I will just try to acquire the skill set any way I can. I often encourage people to think about it kind of like an artist and tracing paper, right? Where if you have tracing papers like this blank, empty paper, if you will, or tracing paper is kind of see-through, right? So you can put it on top of a very complex piece of art or very complex brushstrokes, and you can practice with this tracing paper, tracing over something that's more complicated than you're capable of doing. But what it does is it creates muscle memory and cognitive memory around how to do a thing. So when you go and do it on your own, you're even more capable. I kind of think about GitHub repos in the same way. So you'll see at the end of this session, I'm going to share with you a couple of GitHub repos that I've uncovered that are really useful for just getting your fingers on the keyboard and building something with this technology. It doesn't require you to be extremely technical, but I don't think it's bad. Even if you don't know how to code, there's many ways to do this. I taught myself how to code. Granted, it was 2 decades ago, but I taught myself how to code, and that skill set has always served me, even though today I am not an engineer by trade. Right now, as I've moved into the executive ranks of Accenture, I don't code for a living. I try to anyway, because I think it's fun, but that's not my job. My job is more in leading and talking and presenting information. But I always say I want to be able to go from the boardroom to the whiteboard to the keyboard. And I think that's a great ambition to have as a technologist or as someone who's going to make a difference in the world. Be able to talk to kind of a higher level executive type discussion, be able to then whiteboard out the architecture and the details behind something, and then be able to really build it with your fingers on a keyboard, leveraging maybe some of the GitHub repos I'll share with you. I think it's not a terrible thing to think about, but learning by doing is the critical kind of mindset that gave me the opportunity to say yes to technology I didn't even really understand when I said yes to it. It allowed me to jump right in and learn how to do things kind of by doing it. And I think that's a great practice. And I'm seeing that extremely often with clients that are starting to get into the world of GPT. They are also learning by doing. It's a philosophy that people recognize and are actually using now to drive a lot of this new technology forward. Now, these are a few of the enterprise AI scenarios that I always like to bring up. This is actually based on some research that Microsoft had done. But this is areas where executives have identified that AI has a place. Now, I think it's important to think about, like for me, I have a very unique perspective in the sense that I think of everything through the lens of accessibility, not just for those with disabilities, but also those that are aging. How do we make the world better for them? And you'll see here, like there's lots of different areas that AI can be used to just make business better, right? Reduce friction in the business. But I also want us to think about how do we think also about accessibility? How do we think about inclusion? How do we think about diversity, right? In the lens of these specific areas. I think it's different in retail than it is in healthcare. Of course, the impact is certainly very different. It's different in data center optimization than it is in, supply chain management. So how do we make sure, though, that in all those scenarios, we are being really inclusive in our thought process? So I like to look at all of these, and I like to learn from as many industries as I can. I often, when I'm doing a project, will be implementing it for, of course, a specific company in a specific industry, but always, every time I'm in a project, I am leveraging information from another industry that becomes kind of an accelerator for me in that project. So the more you're able to kind of broaden your awareness and understanding, especially in AI, the better. Now, I wanted to kind of walk you through an example of why, my specific personality, maybe my unique voice has made an impact. And this is just something maybe you recognize. It's like a call center workflow. It's like you call in or you go to a chatbot. Many of us know how to do this, right? Many of us have this experience every day where we go to the website, we ask a question, and a chatbot will answer. Well, up till a year ago or so, that chatbot maybe wasn't very intelligent, right? It broke often, or it would say, I don't know, I'll have to give you to an agent. And the fact that it didn't know was based on the fact that natural language is hard, right? It's very difficult. And so the natural language piece of that means, before GPT, that we had to do a lot of managing what the intent of the user was and mapping that intent to things that our technology could do. And that often was very, very manual. And so what that meant is that if we didn't think about a way that a user might ask a question, that question would then go unanswered, or worse, the bot would be like, I have no idea, I don't know, or not answer at all. And maybe then forward that to a call center with humans. And of course, those humans are much more expensive. So here you see kind of an evolution of this. And when I was building this solution, I really used my own perception of like, what is my friction? When I, as a mom, as a caregiver, am trying to do things, trying to get help, what's my friction? And first thing I think about, and again, this is why it's so important for us to really convey our unique perspective, our unique view of the world, because it changes the solution we build. My unique perspective is if I can ask the question and not talk to a human, I would much prefer to do that because I don't want to wait, number one, for a human. And I often don't even really need, like what I'm asking for is probably not that complicated, or I don't feel like it is. I feel like it should be able to be handled by a robotic process. So you can see here, this is actually from the perspective of an employee, but it doesn't matter. Like this could be good for employee relations, right? Employees calling HR or calling legal or calling the human resources department, or in my case, a mom who didn't get what they needed on Amazon and needs to call in. So I often would start maybe in a chat conversation, or maybe because I've lost faith in chatbots, maybe I go directly to a voice enabled conversation. In either way, though, there's often a robotic process that's intercepting me. And today, with the advent of this new technology, right, this new capability with GPT, I can actually embed semantic search, which is my ability to inform that bot of a whole new collection of structured and unstructured data. Now, the solution itself, right, we could build this, no problem, of course, we could build this without my unique perspective. But what I offer is the ability to think about, what does this look like for a different demographic? Am I asking the right questions? Like, is this going to support someone who doesn't speak English as a first language? And now I know GPT, for example, supports 30 languages out of the box. So if it's possible, I would love to be able to, right, just ask the user to speak in their natural, like whatever their native language is. And if that happens, instantly the friction is reduced, right? Instantly now, whoever's calling can speak in whatever language they want. Now, granted, if it's beyond the 30, maybe we say, oh, we can't support that language at this time. We'll have to, is there another language, or would you like to speak in English? And so these capabilities often, hold on one second, sorry. These capabilities will give us the ability to handle problems for all sorts of clients, language, all sorts of clients early, first, right? As opposed to us having to, again, build very specific solutions as we've done in the past. So that's the first thing we can do, is we can make our virtual agent smarter, which I think is extremely valuable to many of us who've used chatbots that are just broken and not working very well. But that's really the very tip of the iceberg. It's a very minimal, like it's the smallest thing that we could do, honestly. It gets much more interesting when we start equipping humans doing this work to be more capable. So we can use that same conversational assistant that we're using in the virtual agent to actually help humans that are on the call with customers, right? We can use live agent and give them Q&A assist. And I'm going to show you a demo in just a second on how that works. We can also measure how trustworthy an agent is being in the call. Like, are they using credible resources? Do they have resources to give? Can we bubble up strategic next actions for those callers, creating the relationship with the customer? And so there's so many different ways that GPT can actually inform how a live agent does their job better, and then how we can actually educate and train live agents. One of the biggest challenges with call centers is how many people are needed, number one. So we can do some call deflection, right? Get people to not necessarily need to talk to a human by building a better robot. But on the other side of that, how do we make the humans that are doing the work more capable? How do we help them be more successful? And generative AI specifically can help with a lot of that. And I found like my world, my unique perspective as a woman in this, in technology in general, I found that a lot of the teams I'm joining, even today, I often think after 25 years, like our team demographics would be different. But even today, I am often the only woman on a call. I am often the only woman or even brown woman, brown person on a call. And my
Noelle, I think we lost your audio. Noelle, we can see your screen, but we lost your audio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, goodness, it scared me.
Yes,
That's awesome.
we
Sorry
lost
about
your
that.
audio. We lost
Yeah,
your
I'm not
audio.
sure.
You're generally the only woman of color in a meeting, so we kind of lost you for about a minute.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I realized it, and then I was like, I tried to get back in. And it says I have new hardware now. Okay, computer audio. We should be good now, hopefully. All right, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, clear as a bell, but maybe give a quick break if anybody wanted to had any questions for Noelle, because you've been going on for about 45 minutes now, so a glass of water, and if people have some questions, you can do a raise your hand, and then we'll get back into the
Oh
session.
gosh, absolutely. That would be amazing.
But we'll give
Especially
it
because now is when we kind of go into very specifically like how the world is changing around ChatGPT and how I got involved in that that technology. So would love to have any questions.
Yeah, if you did a raise your hand in the next to your name, we'd be able to see that, and then we can unmute you. If nobody has any questions, we'll give it a minute or so.
Sure.
If no questions, or if you want to put a question in the chat. If not, you're welcome to get back to our presentation.
Awesome. Regularly scheduled.
Yes, event.
All right, awesome. And I'm just going to make sure I can share my screen really quick. So you can see my screen, yes?
Yeah, we never saw your video though, but that's okay.
Oh, well, that's all right.
We saw. All right.
All right,
Doesn't look like there's any questions right now, so if you wanted to proceed.
great, thank you.
Yep.
Wonderful. So what I want to do now is kind of talk about this moment. I've been asked a bunch over the last 2 months how I made the transition. You know, right now I am one of the things that I currently do. I lead global AI solutions at Accenture, which meant my job is mostly AI as a whole, not specific to any one type of AI technology. But the next thing, which I think is interesting that happened, was that we wanted to start a new generative AI practice. And because I was learning by doing, right, because I had actually implemented some of the technology that they were asking about, like I had built some GPT projects, I had been on a beta tester on some of the like some of the early product releases at both OpenAI and Microsoft. All of a sudden that skill set, my learning by doing, right, paid off. And I do think, of course, I used to say, I guess I'm just lucky, but now that I've done it at, you know, I was at Alexa at the beginning, I was at Microsoft at the beginning. I also was at VMware when they were starting to spin off a company called Pivotal, which ended up being very big during the big data times with Hive and Pig and Hadoop. And just I now realize that I think there is definitely a lot to the idea of keeping kind of your ear to the ground on the technology that is getting, you know, that there's some hype around. Responsible AI, for example, I decided, of course, I care about responsible AI in general, but I decided to really lean into it from an understanding and educational perspective, a community perspective. I wanted to be involved in the conversations long before like Gartner put it on the hype cycle and it became something we were all talking about. So I think it's really useful to think to yourself as you're, you know, in evaluating, you know, what you do now, whether you want to keep doing that or do something else, that you really look at. I often reference this concept of Aikigai, right? Which is this, I think it's Japanese concept of, it's almost like a Venn diagram. And one circle is, you know, what do you do well? What are you good at? And then another part of that Venn diagram is, what do you love to do? And let's face it, we all recognize that there's sometimes things that we are good at that we don't love. So what is the cross section between what you're good at and what you love to do? And then a superset on top of that is the cross section of not just what are you good at, what do you love to do, but then what does the world need right now? And that, I think, is a key way of approaching any kind of maybe directional shift in your career. Because that's what I did with GPT. Like I saw that opportunity. I did have my mission, which is my children and my dad and kind of making the world better for them. So I had a lens, a mission driven, purpose driven lens that I was looking at all my opportunities through. But then I also had a very clear understanding of my strength. And Greg knew me from way back, 20 years ago, where I like teaching. I like creating opportunities for people to learn new skills and then implement them in real time. And I always was good at that. I like doing it. And so how I've used that, I became an evangelist at Amazon Alexa because I not only wanted to be a builder, but I also wanted to teach people how to build. But that was my skill set. Like all of us have a different type of skill set, and the more we know about that, the better. But that specific kind of learn by doing philosophy, identifying what I'm good at, identifying what I like to do, which is I'm good at teaching and conveying difficult topics, right, at scale. And I like to be able to not only do the teaching, but I also like to build. Lucky for me, a new role was created in our industry called a developer advocate or a technical evangelist. And that was literally the job: build stuff and then go talk about it. And so I encourage all of us, even though you might not see a perfect job description for what you want to do, for this perfect kind of cross section between what you do really well, what you love to do, and what the world needs, that often I have found, at least several times in my career so far, that that job is created by me stating that I am good at that thing. So I'm very transparent, especially on LinkedIn. I use that as a vehicle for sharing my expertise, my passion, what I'm good at, what I want to do. I'm very transparent with the world about my interests, and my core values, so that when I finally, get into a company, it is not a secret. They could just go to LinkedIn and find out the kind of person I am, right? Who I am, how I talk, how I show up in meetings. Like, they know all of that before I even get there. And so that way, like, similarly, they knew I had already been talking about generative AI, and they leveraged that to give me a new opportunity for leadership in the company. But it's why I think, as important as the technology piece of my career is to where I've been able to grow, I think it's just as important to really understand kind of why you're going to use this technology. Like, what is that driving force that will keep you on? Some days I have 12-hour days, and every single half hour is filled with a meeting or two. And it seems ridiculous and crazy and like so much work, but I'm excited about the opportunities that those meetings have. And I'm very intentional about how I spend my time. So I wanted to give you a bit of a crash course in what I learned in order to take advantage of this new time and space in the industry, especially as a minority, as a woman, as a unique voice, but also as a technologist that just has a mission that I want to create a more accessible world. And now more than ever, if I learn what this technology is capable of, I can build better products. And that's, I think, a really critical thing to understand. Like, you, meaning you very specifically, have the ability to create better products because you're there, literally because of your opinion and your perspective. I do think, of course, it's important to join a company that you align, like your core values align together. Otherwise, you may be very frustrated in the outcome. I will tell you, I've taken roles in my career that were perceived as a step back, but only propelled me forward. And I was intentional about that, right? Yes, I'm going to do something in this company and maybe do a fraction of what I'm capable of, but I want to be able to get this specific type of experience so that I can do something bigger later. I am very strategic in my approach to my career, probably also in my approach to my personal life. I want to make sure that I'm doing, that I'm living very intentional, right? That I don't just let my days happen to me, that I'm very intentional. So as a result of that, I set a bunch of goals on the type of technologies I want to get involved in. This year, I did set a goal on building out a practice, a very specific set of education around how do we get the world to increase its literacy about generative AI and what it means and what it can do. And so that brings me to kind of this crash course in GPT that is available. And I think one of the most important things to think about is, it's kind of like our iPhone moment of 2006, not to date myself too much, but where we had the ability to take a device that literally was a computer and put it on our back pocket, and we could use that computer anytime we wanted. Funny thing about the iPhone, though, is I don't remember using it like a computer in the same way I use GPT, even though I could access the internet, I could copy and paste things, I could create emails, I could do all these things that I could only have done from my desktop in the past. And I think that is a really interesting evolution, right? Is that we now see the same kind of capability in this new world with GPT, but it's different because of the evolution that we've seen through the iPhone, through the evolution of applied AI over the last few years. Now, I think this is interesting, and I want to just share it with you so you can get a sense of how different this world is now. 10% of the Fortune 500 are creating content with generative AI. And what that means is that, like, generative AI really became production kind of mainstream at the end of last year. And now, not 6 months later, are we thinking about how to use it in production? 6 months, like, that's not very long. It took us much longer to do that work in the past. So it's something really to be aware of as part of your journey, that this is moving much more quickly than we've seen it move in the past. And organizations and companies are adopting this technology more quickly. So what better time to get in there, learn it, and become an asset to these teams. I also like to think about or share with you a philosophy that I have learned that has helped me in my current stage of building this new AI practice at Accenture. And that is taking what I already know from my previous work and figuring out a way to apply it to my current work. So to give you an example, you're looking here at what I call the enterprise framework for generative AI. Now, in my previous work, I was very passionate about machine learning and specifically operationalizing machine learning, at which point I created this enterprise framework for how you build ML operations at scale. Now I see a lot of similarity in what we're doing today in AI. And so I adopted it, but there are very key differences. The messaging is the same, so that's good news. Like the concept is similar. A lot of us can absorb it if we've been in machine learning for a while. We'll understand the concept of this framework, but the differences are very important. One is that this model, as I mentioned, GPT, right, generative pre-trained transformer, this pre-trained transformer is going to generate new conversational data for us, which is amazing. And I love it. Yay. I'm so glad it happens. However, because it's trained on those 499 million plus websites, and those websites were written by humans, and those humans were likely not 100% factual in everything that they wrote, we have to apply what we call prompt engineering. We have to engineer some knowledge into a pre-trained model on top of its training so that it understands what good and bad looks like. It understands what right and wrong look like, right? So it's really important that we do that and that we operate at that capacity, that we're thinking through how do we ensure the accuracy of a model that's generating content from a bunch of data that maybe wasn't 100% accurate, and more importantly, has implicit and unconscious bias laid into it. So that gives us the second box, content moderation. Again, as a representative of the BIPOC community, right? I am often thinking, how do we make sure that this AI model that we're building doesn't inadvertently impact or negatively impact a demographic that I care about, and I care about all of them, right? How do I make sure that I'm not using generative AI to create a system that dismisses the needs and requirements of a gender, of an ethnicity, of a neurodiverse population? And so you have to have processes in place when you build a generative AI solution that include how do we verify it and make sure that it's generating the right thing at the right time? But then how do we also monitor for implicit and explicit biases that we find in that data? This is on top of the generative model, right? And oftentimes, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have a huge community of incredible AI ethicists. Many of them are in unrepresented or underrepresented communities, right? Whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's the an ethnic group, whether it's a gender group, like many of these ethicists are affiliated and have affinity to a group that's often at a victim, right, of products that end up not being considered about this. And so I think it's really important to see yourself as a potential advocate for solutions that do not go to market without these considerations. That's kind of the moral of this story, is that I was able to use my passion and really empathy for how we were building AI models a year ago and reapply it to this new world and understand the very unique differences between how AI, was built more traditionally in the past and how that changes for generative AI. And I think you have a similar opportunity, right? Your unique experience in the past will give you the ability to talk about this technology and any technology in a different way because you come from a different background and your voice is extremely important. Now, this is for those technical people out there that want to understand a little bit more about what a GPT model is and how it works. But the most important thing here is to go back to one of those earlier lessons I talked about related to inclusive engineering, right? So as we are training a GPT model, it's already pre-trained, but as we're customizing that training with additional data specific to a problem, we will be collecting structured and unstructured data, as you see on the left side of the screen, right? Emails and voice transcripts and chat conversations, contract analysis that we want to do, like all sorts of types of data. The difference though now is that it can actually be embedded inside a single model. I can accept all types of data into a single model and actually generate different types of output. And that's an incredibly new world, right? In the past, I would have had to build a model for semantic search, build a separate model for content generation, a separate model for sentiment analysis. We're now seeing a whole bunch of opportunities here. Great, ways of us being able to look at all these different foundation models and looking at a single model as a multimodal capacity. So all of a sudden, what I used to need 10 different data science teams to do, now I can do, maybe I still need data science teams to do 10 other things, excuse me, but I can now do so much more with a single model. And I don't have to worry about model operations or model choreography or model deployment, right? My capabilities have shifted. And this is what we'll see across the world. I was talking to someone recently who's in policy and safety, and she was sharing with me her concerns about how this will impact, of course, people's jobs. And I shared with her a meme that many of us have probably heard before, but it's a concept of, like AI in and of itself is not going to replace jobs, right? Replace people, but people who are using AI will replace people who don't. And companies, right, who leverage AI will pass and often over deliver on companies who are not leveraging that technology. So the good news is that I feel like GPT really does level the playing field. I don't need 100 data scientists. Sorry, I don't need 100 data scientists. I don't even need 1,000 data scientists, or I should say 10 data scientists. I can actually build a very capable solution with maybe some data engineers, maybe a data scientist, but really people who understand the business problem and can leverage this technology to support them. So lots of really, it's an interesting diagram because I think it does accurately represent how this, how important this evolution is. That it's not just, hey, we're making chat conversations better, but we're actually seeing one machine learning model be capable of delivering results in 6 or 7 different types of use cases. And that is a pretty impressive world. Now, here's just, I always like to share with you, the reason I got excited about this technology before ChatGPT released was because of the types of things I could do with it. So I've been talking about applied AI using models that I didn't build to build better software for years. Imagine, for example, I wanted to build, oh my gosh, I was in a hackathon and it was like 9th through 12th grade, so high school age. And in this hackathon, a young group, one of the younger groups, got up and they described a project that they wanted to work on. And that project was building a homework help app that they could give to foster kids who are in the foster care system. And that homework help app would be camouflaging the ability for us to see and get feedback on how they were being treated by their foster parents. So it would be able to take their picture. It would be able to see if they had bruises, or that if anything, physical was happening. It would also give us the ability to check their emotion and sentiment analysis. And just thinking through this, right? This was a high school organization, a high school kid group of 4 students that were thinking through how do we help this specific use case. And I was so touched by the idea. I was like, that is an amazing idea, because it helps the children who have really very little voice in the system, in the world, get help when they need it. But also, they didn't need to get, they didn't need a big company to build it. They didn't need 100 developers. They themselves were able to get access to these models and call these models to help them do computer vision. They were able to use a web browser to identify how to tag facial like coloring anomalies, so like bruises or contusions. They were able to train a model on what that looked like. And again, they didn't use that for any kind of diagnostic information. They only used it to say, hey, a social worker should go visit this based on information the model picked up. They also had the ability for them to do voice notes. And so they could use it as a journaling entry to say things to a secure and safe place. And that there's so many good capabilities that were brought from this, but the most important thing is that a ninth grader was able to build it. They were able to build it. They, of course, got a lot of attention from some big companies that want to help productize it, which is, I think, is a beautiful thing. But the most important thing is that they didn't need to, you don't need to be a data scientist to leverage foundation models at scale in meaningful ways that can really impact the world in a positive way. Now, I do want to share with you some really cool, interesting new stuff that's recently come out. Amazon has this amazing product, of course, SageMaker. Some of you in the machine learning world probably know this. They launched something called Jumpstart, and Jumpstart is all about how to basically use pre-built machine learning. And again, we call these foundation models today. We use that term, but there's lots of different types of pre-built models, right? Where the model is pre-built and you're just customizing it at the model level, meaning you're taking existing code and changing the algorithm. We're talking about models that are existing and pre-trained and can serve as a foundation in the same way GPT can be used. So SageMaker launched Jumpstart specifically for foundation models. It gives you the ability to go through and look at all the models that are available. There's a set of solution templates that you can leverage. You click on those templates. It then allows you to customize, which is what we call fine tuning, right? We can customize it with example data sets, with specific examples that we want to use to train the model. And then, of course, we can deploy it. I want to give you just a view of what that looks like inside the tooling. But what I like about this, there it is. So what I like about these foundation, this is not all of them, it's just a few graphics so I could give you an example. But Alexa has a model that is available so you can use voice to text, speech to text, text to speech. You also have Hugging Face. I just like their icon, so of course I use them. But there are Hugging Face foundation models available now, Stability AI for stable diffusion models. So this gives you a solid set of foundation models, meaning models that are pre-trained, ready for you to use, that now just need your specific data from your client or from your specific use case, right, to be functional. If you don't, it ends up being very generalized knowledge, similar to the way ChatGPT works today. This is an equalizer, right? In my mind, I want every minority or BIPOC startup founder to know that they have this technology at their disposal, right? That they can build a technology solution based on a foundation model relatively easy. Of course, it's available on AWS. It's also available on other cloud providers at different levels of capacity, but I thought it'd be interesting for you to see kind of what this looks like. Now, this is inside SageMaker Studio. The whole point of it is to reduce the impact of you having to learn how to code and be an actual machine learning engineer, and shift you instead over to an awareness of how to use a no-code, low-code solution. Now, I say this almost in jest because building machine learning in a no-code environment doesn't mean you don't have to know machine learning. So you're going to be given a bunch of knobs and levers in which to turn and push and pull, and you're going to have to understand the impact of those selections. You'll have to understand the impact of the parameters that you change on the model. So it doesn't mean you don't know anything about it. It just means you don't have to write the code, which in and of itself is valuable. But you'll also see here I highlighted it in red, right? We've got these solutions, pre-built notebooks. Remember I talked to you about learning by doing and having tracing paper to kind of get your feet wet and learn the muscle memory of building these types of projects. All of that's here. I will tell you one of maybe it's somewhat of a sad story, but one of the harder parts of my career has been trying to get seen within an organization based on my skill set. And I will tell you one of the things that has helped me tremendously in this space is to not just learn by doing, but then actually share my learning with the world, create my own repo, create my own repositories on GitHub that other people can build from. Being able to share my ideas, and a lot of these examples will help propel you to create your own ideas. For example, one of my most successful Alexa skills actually came out of an idea that I had once I built 7 other projects on, I don't know if it was on GitHub. I think it was on GitHub at the time. So I built 7 other projects. And then once I did those 7, I was like, oh, I could use a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one, right? They were all open source. So I commercialized it, if you will. I took pieces from each one of the ones that I had tested, and I create something net new. I guess maybe in the same way, right, that we are seeing some of our foundational works today. So really a great opportunity to play around with SageMaker. There are a couple of really fun projects that you can get involved with in order to increase your awareness of how to build machine learning. One of them is in the links I'll provide in this deck that we'll share with you in our follow-up, kind of thank you email. But one of them is around Deep Composer, which is a music composition application, but it's set in the context of education. So it's a way of learning about machine learning while you're using this kind of musical application. Super fun. We also have another one at AWS called Deep Racer. I was actually part of the team that originally created the Deep Racer methodology, which was totally for fun. We built out a racetrack and we wanted to basically train remote control cars. We wanted to embed them with a Raspberry Pi and then train an autonomous driving machine learning model. And we would train that model, we would train it in simulation. We'd then upload the model to the actual car and have the car drive around the track based on our training. And of course, some people did really well, some people didn't, but we would race for pink slips, which meant that if you lost, you'd lose your car. And it was super fun. We did it as a team. It was just a way to learn the technology. Within a couple of months, we started doing it at reInvent. Today, you can go to reInvent, not today, but this year you could go to reInvent and they have an entire installation all about Deep Racer where you can virtually train an autonomous vehicle using the same technology that I'm showing with you here, virtually train the autonomous RC car, have it uploaded to an RC car on a track and have it race. You won't be racing for pink slips because that's too difficult to do at scale, but you do get to claim ownership. You get it. I think I didn't bring it with me, but I have a jacket, a race jacket that I won doing that activity. And it's just a fun way to learn. So create opportunities, obviously going into GitHub and rebuilding a GitHub project. If you don't care about it, you might not be as invested in it. But if you like music, maybe you can use Deep Composer. If you're into like gaming and racing and things like that, like maybe Deep Racer is a better way to go. Both of them are meant to help teach you how to build better solutions. And I think it's really fun and it's how I often learn myself. So one thing I always like to do is just give you, I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so. I'm going to take a break and see if you have any questions about what has, and of course, just throw them in the chat if there's any questions at all. But I'm going to start walking through some of the practical exercises that I have learned and used. I'm going to show you a couple of repos that I have used on GitHub, some ways to get started. I'm going to show you Deep Racer, not Deep, well, I might show you Deep Racer, but I'm definitely going to show you Deep Composer as we get into this. But I do want to give you an opportunity to chime in and say hello, as well as either ask questions or make comments. If anyone's done Deep Racer, I would love to, to hear about it. I think, oh, I see. Interesting. So I don't know. I see a bunch of you on here, like Amy and Andrea and Angelica. Nice to see you. So if anybody here has any kind of questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you because it's been just me so far. Teresa, hi, Sonia's here, awesome. Pam, Pam's here too. Oh my gosh, I know some of you people. So great to have you here. I'm so glad that you're here. So if you have any questions or comments, now's your chance. Throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to move into the more practical side of this and demonstrate some of the capabilities that we have talked about. The first one, and just feel free to jump in. There's no harm in that. But the first one is around, let me escape, is around what I have been building centers. So I think it's really important that you walk away from this webinar understanding why it's so important that your unique voice is heard. I built this solution during my time so far at Accenture. Oh, that's really small. I'm gonna have to make it bigger and then I'll get out of it and show you the demo. But I built this solution I talked about earlier today. Oh, that's interesting. Let me switch it, hold on. And this solution is, from my perspective, right, a lot of the friction I have in my life is around getting support when I need it. And oftentimes it's a call center type solution, right? So I want a smarter robot to answer my questions. I want accessibility to that to be 24/7. I want to be able to type, and I also want to be able to, oh, I see. I want to be able to type, and I also want to be able to, oh, my chat window, really? I hope not. Oh goodness, that would be terrible. Thank you, Nisha. Thank you so much for telling me that. I had no idea that was happening. That's terrible. Well, I'll send you the deck so you can see it. Thank you, Nisha, for mentioning. So one of the things that I think is very useful in this scenario, again, as someone who is constantly in a situation where I'm asking for help or trying to get support, I have of course, a lot of little humans that need to go to the doctor. My dad is aging. He also needs to go to the doctor. Just managing care is extremely difficult. I have to get people on the phone. While I'm talking to them, they're searching a calendar. While they're searching their calendar, I'm searching my calendar. It's just extreme. It should not be that hard. I feel like I should be able to set an appointment without talking to anybody. And we are now at a point where we've got technology to do that. We also, though, need to support the people that are handling these calls. And so I'm going to walk you through what I have built as an example, and then show you a couple of prompt engineering examples that I built as well. And this is how I learn. I come up with an idea of a problem that I want to solve. I then create kind of a picture of how I want to solve it, which you'll see here. The flow of this solution, oops, is, let me, I'm gonna, oh gosh, no, cancel. I'm gonna try and make this smaller so that you all can see it. Sorry. Hold on one second. There we go. So you can walk through the flow, right? Somebody has either they go through a chat bot or they make a call directly to support. The AI agent is then able to answer most of their questions, even if their question requires documents. Like, let's say you're getting, I'll give you a very specific example. I was working with an insurance company. They are managing death benefits, right? Kind of a sad scenario, but really important. Death benefits. Someone someone has passed away. Their beneficiaries are trying to get their benefits to kick in as soon as possible. In many cases, as you can imagine. And today, what happens is that they have to mail in the death certificate. It takes weeks for that to be processed. It takes another set of weeks for the insurance to get activated. And what we did was we ended up applying AI to solve that problem, where instead, and it's actually not even via phone, it is via chat, but we ended up using WhatsApp. And so in WhatsApp, you can contact the company and say, I'd like to, I've had a death in the family. This person is, I'm a beneficiary on this. And you start the conversation. The GPT model will then continue the conversation to extract whatever it needs in order to qualify that you are this person, maybe sending an SMS, text message, right? Maybe sending some kind of third-party verification, then getting into the questions that are needed to qualify the actual beneficiary request. So maybe it says, do you have a copy of the death certificate? Has that come in yet? They say yes. Now, rather than saying, hey, mail it to us, or oh my goodness, fax it to us, instead, what we're going to do is take a picture of it, right? So now I'm going to take a picture of this as the beneficiary. I take a picture and I submit it in WhatsApp. Now, because we have AI that does this is step 2 in this process, right? I can, with 100% accuracy, I can measure the results of I can measure and extract all the data that's coming out of that form and input it into other systems. So now that used to be a point of friction where a human had to do that work. Now we use an AI model and there's actually an applied AI model that does this as well. Document recognition is a applied model that you can use where you give it a document, a PDF, an image, and it extracts the content from it. As a matter of fact, today, if you have an iPhone, if you take a picture of something, when you go into the gallery and look at that picture, there's a little icon that shows up in the corner, the lower corner, that allows you to extract all the text from that image. So you can even do it as a consumer. So this technology is quite available, but now I can take that information and give it to the right systems so that now within 2 days, I can have those benefits enabled as long as there's not an anomaly or some weird situation. But if it applies and you're able to go through all of the actuary steps that are necessary to enable benefits, you can get through that process in as little as 2 days to a week, as opposed to 6 weeks to 3 months. And of course, this is in an environment where it's extremely beneficial to get those benefits as soon as possible. One of the most popular feedbacks or messages that were given back by people who are using this in the beta was that they really, whether they were less worried about how long it took and more excited about the feature that allowed them to get feedback every day. Like anytime they wanted feedback on the status of their request, they could just send a WhatsApp message and get a robotic process to give them feedback. So that was they were most excited about, right? Less about, oh my gosh, when did I get my benefits? But more, it's so much better to know what's happening, who has it, is it stuck? Is it getting processed? Is a human looking at it? Getting that real-time feedback about a process. And that's something that we can offer now with this technology. Now I want to go in and show you, I have a couple of different capabilities that I want to kind of demonstrate for you. First, there are a set of, hold on, I'm coming back.
Noelle, I think we may have lost your audio again. But hopefully you're aware and are working on it.
Testing.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I just wanted to walk through, maybe just a chance to give everyone a break on my talking. The universe is like, stop talking. But this is just a couple of examples. One of these, and I'll throw it in the chat actually for some of you who might be interested in this. But this is the type of thing that I use to accelerate my capabilities and accelerate my ability to learn something fast. I often align myself with communities of people that are, there you go, that are learning, doing, documenting, and then once I find it, of course, I do, like I just did, I share it with you. So this is a prompt engineering guide. It's one of the best I've found. It is constantly updated. There's lots of contributors to this. So I feel like this is a great asset that you can now have at your disposal. I'll also share with you, I think I have, yes. So I'm just going to put the Jumpstart URL in here as well, just to give you a sense of, again, what I do is I just go and I start to play. Most of these, you might need a AWS account. I mean, you definitely will need an AWS account, but AWS has a program called AWS Educate. They have lots of different programs that you can go in and get access to some of these for testing. They also have free tier, which is your first year on the platform, and that'll give you the ability to play around with this technology as well. So one of the things I think is useful, oh, great. Oh, wonderful, great. And Greg actually will be able to share with you, I'm gonna send him this PDF, so if you have a question about getting the PowerPoint deck or getting access to any of these resources, I will share with you that at the end of the deck, there is a collection of all the URLs that I use. You're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can copy and paste those URLs in there if that's easier for you as well. But I think one of the most important things to remember is that, you know, kind of the burden I have put on myself is to constantly keep up to date, of course, with what's happening in the world, and then go back to that cross section, you know, that Ikigai diagram, right? Figure out what are you good at, what do you love to do, and what does the world need?